Hey, this is Rogue. So recently, K9 released a video called Deadlock Wave Management and Optimizing Soul Farming. And I enjoyed this video a lot, but I had a number of questions. I don't come from a MOBA background myself, so there's a lot that goes into the wave management and ways to sort of manipulate the state that a lane can be in, and specifically how to go about that in the way that you end up with a lot more souls and the way to optimize farming in lane versus the jungle. Yeah, I had a lot of questions there, and K9 kindly sat down with me and went through a whole discussion on a lot of these topics, a lot of the ins and outs, a lot of the opportunity costs, and different considerations of when to go for these types of farming strategies and ways to adapt on the fly for different circumstances. So yeah, basically his video is linked down below, and I would definitely watch that first. It's pretty short. Finally, our whole long discussion is attached here, and I hope you enjoy. The structure of my question was, what is the opportunity cost, right? Like, when are the times that it's not good to go for the rebounding play? One of them was, if our approach is to let the wave crash all the way back into our walker so we can eat all of the farm, that means we wouldn't hypothetically have a lane pushed up far enough to, take a zip line to mid boss, for example, or we wouldn't have enough, a far enough lane to push into an enemy walker or something like that. The second downside is with the, or not downside, the opportunity cost anyway, is if we lose a couple minions, then basically, even if losing just the 3 minions while we let the wave crash all the way back in, again, they're going to lose 12 minions and we're going to lose only 3. But even those 3 are worth 300 souls, so the amount of time in the jungle has to last at least those 300.
Yep. So I don't necessarily have an actual answer for the actual cost, but I think let's just put it into a real world scenario. So you're in a lane, and early on you're not really leaving and coming back to where minions are actually dying. You know what I mean? Like you can only go so far to get this level 1 camp, or maybe get this tier 2 camp, and you're not actually losing full waves. But then later on, when you're getting to full waves possibly being lost because you've got a longer lane, I think it's easier to just put yourself in this scenario. So let's say your wave is somewhere, say it's here, and you're not sure if you want to leave because you don't want to lose this farm, right? Is that what we're saying? Because if you leave, you're going to lose some of the farm. Is it worth it to leave? That's kind of the question.
Yeah, or at the very least, when, yeah, just trying to think of basically, if I recognize this as an opportunity, right? Let's say I kill my lane opponent and I say, ooh, I can, or we kill both of them. Ooh, we can go for that play where we push our lane all the way up to their walker, but we leave to farm and then let their wave crash all the way back into our walker, eat all the farm after. I recognize that we get more souls than the enemies by a lot by going for that play. But I was just curious, basically, when are opportunities we wouldn't want to do that?
Well, so real quick, this is something I think we need to think of too, is there's two mindsets of plays that you can go for. One is if you actually want to fight and do damage, try to get the walker. But the second is if you don't want to do that, you just want to get the farm. And I oftentimes am in the farming mindset, because if you push, your wave all the way up to the walker, why not just shoot it? Why not just try to get that farm? If you don't think you're going to be able to kill it, you don't think you're going to be able to do enough valuable damage, you're worried about them coming back and killing you, that's when you might go lead, right? So what I'm trying to say is, if you stay here and you don't leave, what do you think is going to happen? If you just stay here and you just kill the minions, and then the next wave comes and you kill the minions, and the next wave comes and you kill the minions, they're going to come deal with you, right? You're creating a problem that they're going to come have to deal with. So in the question of, is it worth it to leave because I might lose more, I'm going to lose some souls here, and I want to make sure that value is made up here and here. My response is, you have to leave at some point, right? You can't just stay for forever. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So the question of when the wave crashes back in and they lost 3 waves and I lost 1 wave, so obviously I'm winning in that exchange. Is it worth it? At some point, you can't just stay in lane for forever and just sit around it and soak up the farm. You're gonna want to leave and catch all this, and then catch it back here. Does that kind of answer that, at least in the question of how much am I going to lose? Is it worth it? The question is, the answer is basically you're gonna have to leave at some point. You can't just sit here for forever.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Yeah, basically, you said, like, does that answer the question? Yeah, I guess when I had asked those questions, like, under your video, my instinct, anyway, is to, like, baby the lane a lot more. So I would maybe push it up to their walker, recognize, yeah, like, I don't stand any chance to do anything meaningful now that my wave's at their walker, so I will leave. But I think I would leave for a very short amount of time. Whereas, and like, you know, maybe once the wave starts getting even close to the middle of the map, I would immediately want to go back and keep the map pressure and keep that map control for our zip lines to go further into their territory, right? But some of the principles that you described is that we actually want to let it go all the, like, once it's in their side, let it go all the way back to our side so we can eat all of the farm in a shorter amount of time. That way you don't have to baby the lane. You still get the waves, but you also get jungle farm in the meantime.
Yeah, let me give you an example of, you're saying you want to baby the wave, right? So let's say you pushed it all the way in and it rebounded a little bit, like it's now in this state, and you know it's going to keep pushing into you. There's 6 red minions and there's 4 yellows, and you know it's going to push back into you. This is a situation where the enemy has to deal with this. This is not you babying the lane. This wave needs to be fixed for the enemy, because again, if they don't deal with it until it hits here, and then they still don't deal with it until it hits here, they're losing so much farm, right? So when it's pushed into this state, a smart enemy player will say, I need to fix this lane. Because again, if you're taking in the mindset of it needs to be pushed all the way into the lane, they don't want to lose this wave, and then this wave, and then this wave. And then they lost 3 full waves while it was slowly pushing into me. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I guess
And
my
then,
philosophy still, though, is that I can leave it, like, I basically have them tied to this lane until they fix it, or even if we both stay in this lane for a while, both of us are tied to it. However, I can leave it anytime with zipline, and I can access a lot of the map. They cannot really, like, get as many places as quickly. I
you're
guess they can
saying,
leave with zipline and go to a different lane, but at the very least,
right.
like, I have access to their farm, and they don't have access to mine. Like, I could get their farm on my way out, and then mine on the way out, if our lane is aggressive. But if our lane is not aggressive, then, yeah, basically it feels like we have less just access to different things in the map, and you know.
Right. So by it being pushed up, this is the opportunity cost. If I don't have it pushed up, again, I'm losing map control. I think, again, the point is thinking of a farm mindset versus a fighting mindset. And I am, for me to say this wave is pushed up to here, I don't think the wave or the game is going to be won or lost, like in this, because of that, opportunity cost of me saying, well, yes, I lost my entire this much zip line, but I do get all of that farm. And that's just, I mean, I think you make a good point though, in that there is that value in having that zip line. That's just something that I don't personally, even think of. I want the farm. I think,
That is
and
a
yeah,
good
it's
point, yeah.
about being in a controlling and kill, fight mindset versus farm. I'm just gonna put that here. Fighting versus farming. And real quick, I want to segue that into something else that I mentioned to you that I think is kind of crazy, and I'm genuinely not entirely sure how much it would be utilized, but something that I thought would blow your brain, and to the point where, again, I'm not even sure how real this is. But let's say we are in a pure fighting mindset. We no longer care about farm. We're all super farmed, and now we just want it. We don't care about the waves in terms of farm. We want them to be in the best state possible for a fight. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And you had mentioned, well, we push up all the wave, or we push the wave up and then we go to mid or something like that. And I have a counterpoint that I think is kind of crazy. The way that you would secure mid is to let them push it all the way up into your walker to the point where it looks like this. Because now I go to mid, and by the time that mid fight starts, they have 6, 7, 8, 9 minions smacking their walker, right? You follow me? This creates a ticking time bomb where in the middle of that fight, a giant wave crashes into their walker. Whereas if the opposite, if I push my wave all the way up into their walker, that puts us on a ticking time bomb where now maybe the mid fight goes wrong, huge wave just accumulated and is crashing into our walker. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially with the super minions, like, rather than having one wave of super
Yep.
minions spawning at their tower and then dying, instead we would basically stack our waves of super minions that bowl, like, and I guess that's those times too that you see, I mean, I've had this too. I'm kind of recognizing that You know those questions like, how does this keep happening for the opponent but never happens
Oh
in favor of
no.
us, right? So those times that yeah, the enemy will basically just have this like mega wave that goes through our walker and then through our spawn towers, right?
Yeah.
So an opportunity like this, yeah, basically going for mid boss and then also having the rebound play at once kind of doubles the effectiveness of the super minions. That absolutely did blow my mind as
Yeah.
predicted. Nice.
Real quick, the if I set up a huge wave here, and then by the time it hits their tower, and let's say mid dies right now, only the minions over here will get buffed. At least that's what Kabi told me. Shout out to Kabi. Zipline minions on the zipline will get buffed. Minions on the ground will not.
Yeah, I believe
But
that's
it
correct.
will still stack, like what you said. Again, that's putting that still. If we let's say we go for a mid fight and I put a wave here, slowly pushing into them, it always still has the opportunity to still backfire. Because one thing that you can think of that I don't know if I covered in the video is if a wave crashes and in this walker does not die, it's going to crash even harder back. If 10 minions hit this walker, like 12 minions are going to hit this walker. And if somehow miraculous this doesn't die to that, an even bigger wave is going to hit this walker. Do you know what I mean? It bounces even harder back and forth unless it kills the walker. So the point I'm trying to make is if for whatever reason that the mid fight goes even longer and we set up the wave here, I guess it gives us an even longer clock before it finally comes back to us. But that does come with the cost of, again, we're sacrificing the farm in this lane because I'm saying our minions are going to eat all of the farm, but that's in a pure fight mindset. No farming. This is all about causing doomsday for them in this lane.
Sure. Yeah, I guess something that is motivating a lot of my decision making here is I feel like I'm in the fight mindset more often. I think in the case where, like, if I see some chance to win a fight, like a fight that's even slightly more beneficial for us, then we can farm after the fact, or we can go for a objective. But maybe if I were to frame it in the way that, let's say we're talking about this point in the game, like it's, all 6 alive and be no towers, but all walkers are up. If we basically talk about the opportunity cost of the fight versus farm, I want to keep the wave into their walker so that we have map control. But a question is, at the end of a 5-minute span, let's say, how good is it to have had that map control versus how good is it to have had that farming? I guess if we have the map control, the only hope that we can have is to, maybe get a pick on like 1 or 2, but I don't know if that's really enough to turn into an objective win. And like maybe it's get a little bit more freeing time for farming after that fight, but again, that's a hope. Versus the farming play here is a lot more of a guarantee, right? So if we were to get the souls, 5 minutes of like extra souls basically at the end of that, if we have, maybe another 1200 cost item, if we're farming pretty well, and maybe 2 1200 cost items, right? Then that probably will give us an opportunity to fight later anyway.
Right.
So yeah, maybe I'm focusing too much on using fights to allow us to farm, and instead using farm to allow us to fight is sort of that paradigm I'm not used to.
Yeah. One thing I would say, I don't know if this is what you're saying, but if let's say we have map control here, usually that comes at a cost of not having map control here, and players will rotate back and forth between their 2 lanes, fixing the lanes. You'll see that dance a lot, especially when there were 2 mid lanes. People would get the farm here, and then they would get the farm here, and then they'd get the farm here, and then here, and the other team would do the exact opposite. They'd bounce back and forth, catching the farm. If we find ourselves in a situation where we have every lane, pushed up to here, I would say at that point, go, keep it pushed up. You're not going to be like, oh, let it rebound. Like you're catching you've got them smothered off at that point. You know what I mean? And that game's basically won. So I want to get into like in practicality showing like one way you can completely screw up and just lose a ton of souls without realizing it, as well as what you should be looking for in terms of catching the waves, and not screwing over your teammates. Because again, this is something that I would see a lot. Real world scenario is it looks like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 yellows. It's pushing into me, and let's say I'm on the zip line, right? 99% of people are going to come clear this, and then do a jungle camp, and then go because the first is the farm, and then they're going to do a jungle camp, and then what? They don't know. They've got the wave up here somewhere, and it's not their problem anymore. You know what I mean? Do you agree?
Yep.
I feel like that if there's a wave right here, you come do the wave, and then you don't go into enemy territory, and then you do a jungle camp. That's like the worst thing you can do, because what you've done is you've just created a freeze into the enemy where you're bleeding farm. And I mean, I guess the jungle camp doesn't matter, but you've done things in the wrong order. If you're Because they want to stay safe and they just want to get their farm right here. What I would do in that situation is, well, if you're on the zip line, that's one thing, but I would say I would catch this farm, catch the wave, and then shove it all the way back in. And that's like the perfect loop of getting the most farm you possibly can. And I feel like being able to recognize that is something that for whatever reason is difficult with people. And this, I think this is the main thing that I want people to understand, is looking at a wave and determining, how do I get this in the best state possible, and how do I get the most farm in that amount of time.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And yeah, I mean, that's a super clear, like, because I absolutely am the type of teammate that would look at the wave setup like this and see you kind of between yellow and blue here, and then go for that wave anyway. So maybe
Right.
I'll ask, I guess, yeah, I mean, this is an exercise in me unlearning, I guess, these, yeah, like kind of lane management and like, the wave management that I'm not so used to. So here's a question for you then. Let's say, like the blue and green lanes are totally even in the middle of the map and there's not really much happening and the waves are like frozen right there. Okay, now I am a new spawner, right? And I'm in spawn and I see that the wave is going to follow this pattern you just described on yellow, and I see that you are between blue and yellow, like ready to catch it. If I'm this spawner, I guess it doesn't, like, another idea sort of that I have for myself is I have a really fast rotate to the waves at yellow. So normally I would clear them right away. Now what I would do is let them kill my minions and then after it crashes basically eat all the farm at once, right? But my idea there is I have a faster rotate to this and you're already in the jungle. So you can continue farming the jungle, or you're closer to another lane or the enemies or whatever. I have a fast rotate here, so it almost makes sense for us to swap and for me to clean up yellow, you to keep jungling. Because I guess my question for you then is, if I am a new spawner and the map is in this state, what should I be doing instead of going yellow, if there is anything?
So I think I caught myself off guard when I realized I had teammates in this example, but because I am a fairly greedy player, I would say what I would love in this situation, because I don't. The thing about the souls in this game is they are very valuable when shared. So I would love if they waited a tiny bit. The problem is for you to just sit around and wait is a waste of a you know 10 seconds. If it took me 10 seconds to get this, I would love if they let me finish this and then we both meet up. Let's say all of the minions died, and then we both maybe shove it out together. That's what I would say in this scenario, is share the farm. You might take me a second to don't greet it, kill a couple, but then we shove the entire lane out together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess in
Because
either case, my call is to, like, as a spawner, is to say, hey, do you want to get yellow together?
yeah,
Or,
yeah.
yeah.
The worst case scenario would be, again, if this happens to me all the time. This is real worst case scenario, is they come and take the farm and then just leave, because that, one, took the farm, and two, put the wave in a state that I have to fix, you know?
Right.
Uh, there's another concept I wanted to go over that is somewhat advanced that I don't really think happens too much in this game. I do it a lot when my walker dies early because I got completely stomped. And it's called freezing. Do you know what freezing is?
I've watched a couple of videos on it, yeah.
So for those unaware, freezing is when, if you have, especially if you have a long lane, if you have the farm in a safe space, like at my double guardians, my base guardians, that's pretty safe for me. And let's say the wave is pushing into me. What I do is I just let it continue to push into me, and I only last hit the minions right before they die, and I don't ever rebound the wave back into their walker, and I don't ever let the wave push into my guardians. So that way I can safely farm while also denying the enemy entire waves. The only way for them to deal with this is they have to come all the way up here and push it into my guardian in order to make the wave rebound again. And that, my goal is, hey, look how much they have to overextend to fix this wave. So I'm going to freeze the lane. I will say in this game, freezing is not nearly as common because it's a very fast-paced game and there is all of this farm on the map. So even if I am denying them, this is sort of that opportunity cost. If I'm saying I'm denying you all of your waves, well, they're denying me all of my jungle because they have all of this map control. Um, so yeah, high level, I don't know. Freezing, haven't seen it too much in this game. I do it sometimes when I get tilted, when I get absolutely obliterated in lane. But I still think usually they just come up and they still beat me because they can. And that zip line, actually this kind of ties into your point. Even though it feels like they are super overextended here, this zip line makes it so they're not necessarily very overextended. They can rotate very quickly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have seen a lot of lane freezing, I think, or not. It's, I guess, not as common as it is in other MOBAs, like you mentioned, but it is something that I have seen at the pro level in Deadlock. And yeah, I think that is very clear how you can. Basically, the minions are the best farm on the map, like more than the jungle, and well, I guess not more than objectives, but like you mentioned, the objectives are already gone. So you're sort of denying them the opportunity to get any of these minions that are spawning. So you continue to farm minions. They basically cannot because you let you let their minions kill yours.
Right.
But I also would just add, I guess, we're recording this at the time where the patch just dropped that you actually don't even have to last hit anymore. You just have to be nearby. Right. So yeah, it's interesting too how like even mid lane freeze, you basically just have to be close enough to the minions so you can even like lean towards the jungle camps now and continue collecting that farm, and then yeah, while you're waiting maybe for the next wave from the enemies. But again, if you're freezing it well, it'll kind of time well with the next wave anyway. But yeah, I guess that is a good point, like you mentioned, where what the enemy should do in the situation is like say go ahead and let the wave be frozen, I guess, that deep into enemy territory while they eat your farm. Because yeah, I think that's something that is so suffocating when basically if you can steal the enemy team's farm, then not only are you already beating them, you deny them the comeback of getting those farmed souls too. So, and then you can go and farm your own jungle after that. So you basically eat the entire half of the map's worth of jungle, right?
Also, in freezing situations, you can really piss off your teammates because they're just going to show up here and kill that guardian and that walker. And that's the point when you should cancel your freeze and re-push back into the guardian. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, can you actually tell me more, like, what is sort of the initiative you're looking for to decide to stop freezing?
Yeah, so let's say I have the wave frozen under me, and the enemy team, or usually what will happen is the person who is laning against me will go somewhere else and say, well, guess what? You're now fighting, your teammates are fighting a 2v3, and we're just going to stomp them. That's the situation where you're going to want to, again, push the wave all the way back into their tower so it fully resets, and then farm whatever jungle you can. If you've gotten, usually I play McGinnis, and so I would, if I'm like 0-5, I'm going to just put pressure on this Guardian and this Walker and die for it at that point. But yeah, the short answer is when you find a safe point and you see that opponent who is kicking your ass, you see them on the other side of the map.
I see. That makes sense. I'd actually love to ask another like follow-up here. So
Sure.
A lot of what we're talking about now is the balance between like when to be in lane and the different states of the lane versus like what opportunities you have to go and farm, where farming is like gives you more souls than it would to just sit in your lane and do and like just farm whatever comes. So what is your sort of philosophy on how far forward basically to farm in the enemy camp, right? Because stealing the things closer to the enemy is more valuable because it denies them the opportunity to go for it. But farming safer on your side means that you don't risk dying. So when you're in these, maybe you could choose whatever situation, but how far, like how aggressively into the enemy territory do you farm when given the opportunity to go for farm?
I would say it depends on how heavily, I'm winning. If I feel, because you've already done one thing, you've usually what'll happen is, well, let's say I don't have to buy, because a lot of times when you get it shoved into their walker, you just cashed in a bunch and you want to leave to go shop. But let's say I've shoved in and now I want to go farm. I could get greedy if I think that I'm not going to lose, because let's say I get really greedy and I get this, and then I get this, and then I get this, and then all of a sudden, boom, there are waves like right here, and I need to get all the way back before I miss all that farm. I would say it kind of, depends on that. The number one thing that I'm thinking about in terms of greeting their jungle is making sure that I catch this wave. Because I've already, kind of greeted, I'm playing super economically with this wave and having it bounce back. And if I get too greedy in the jungle again, then the whole plan just falls apart, because this wave um, not only do I like lose my objective, but let's say I don't even respawn by the time all the minions die to this walker. Does that make sense? It's a similar. Let me give you another idea, just a similar idea. One way you can get extremely punished by freezing, for example, because if I'm freezing, I've got an entire big wave of red minions or yellow minions stacked up right here, right? Let's say I have like 1.5 waves stacked up right here.
Yep.
If I die right here, I lose, not only do I lose my freeze, but I lose all that farm that was just sitting there, and then I lose everything that bounces back the other way. Now I've got the wave bouncing against me, and I have to go fix that wave. So, yeah, high level, it depends on this wave state and ensuring that you can catch it before it gets back here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I ask, I think, because when I was like at a lower rank, basically, I was excited because recognizing, yeah, like, oh wow, if I get their, let's say I get their walker kind of uncontested, or like they should contest me, but they don't, they make a different decision, that happens. Then I think, great, well, I can deny their farm and, maybe have a quicker exit again because of the zip line and things like that. Or if we have a numbers advantage, I can call my team in or something. Especially because I tend to play characters that like can escape a 1v1 pretty comfortably. But what I'm recognizing later and later is that these times that I got greedy enough to go for the enemy farm in opportunities where I'm kind of left unchecked, now they're starting to send 2 or 3 players to like absolutely pick me off, right? So now I'm starting to play a lot safer. Like, I might go like almost like directly horizontal. Like, I want to get greedy with my farm if I've gotten a kill or an objective or something. But now I recognize that, like, since it'll take me more than, 10 seconds to get the amount of farm that I'm looking for, obviously that's enough time for the enemy to rotate or take a zipline and coordinate others on top of me. So yeah, that's why I ask.
I think it does come into almost like a fight versus farm mindset of, I have, like, if the map is like this and all this jungle's up, one thing I was thinking was almost like a triangle. You push up and you can either take their farm and then catch the wave here, or you can push up and then get your farm and catch the wave here, right? And I prefer to take the safer route. I want to catch all my farm right next to this wave to make sure that worst case scenario, I'm not going to miss this wave when it crashes back into me, right? That's my number one priority.
Sure.
Because, that might happen is, let's say you push the wave up, it's slowly pushing into you, and you go get this jungle, and next thing you know, they're chasing you, and they're chasing you, and they're chasing you, and they're chasing you, and your guardian just died, and your walker just died. You know what I mean? If you instead just go back, they're not, your escape is here, or your escape is here. You're not going to miss the farm.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So I have another question for you here. Sure. So we talked about the rebound play, right? Of basically pushing into the enemy, letting it rebound back into us, and then collecting all the farm. We talked about freezing. We talked about map control for fighting versus, again, this wave management for farming. So I'm curious, basically, how the different times in the match change this. Basically, like right after laning phase, maybe we're at the 10-minute mark, versus how does your thought process change at the 25-minute mark, and then how does it change after that at the 40-minute mark, for example, if it gets that long?
I'll start with something that I noticed when I was just making this map, is that at the beginning, like, again, you have so little time to like rotate because the waves are spawning constantly. Your damage is low. You're not killing the minions very fast. So something that almost maybe, or I kind of realized, is like your zone of control that you can roam is almost like the distance that you have between your objective and their objective. So that's how much distance there is. So that means I can go about this far, at this stage in the game. But let's say I get their guardian down. Now this is your zone of control. Now you can have about, this much movement. Don't go that way before, you can come back and catch the wave. And you'll notice this too, like early on, everyone stays in lane. No one's leaving lane. But then later on in the game, when objectives start to die, you go, a full minute without seeing somebody show up here. And they show up just for a second to fix the lane, and then they dip again. They're gone again. You know what I mean? A few reasons. One, yeah, is everyone's damage is so much higher. They can clear the waves so quickly. And then 2, yeah, you have such a longer time before you actually have to deal with the waves. Does that make sense? Early on, you're very much tied to your lane, But then once the lane gets longer, you can be gone for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, come back, catch the wave, and do it all over again, be completely gone. Um, Another thing that I don't, this is just kind of in terms of game length that I mentioned before, is the longer the game goes on and the longer the objectives or the distance between objectives get, the more deadly waves become. And it's kind of a cool little inherent thing just to MOBAs. Like, I don't think they designed the game to be this way, but the longer a wave is, the more likely the game can just end from a single minion wave. Because, like, let's say a fight takes place here, and a fight takes place here, and then a fight takes place here, and a fight takes place here, and a fight takes place here. It's always pushing that way. Each one of those times, yellow gets a little bit more reinforcements until it's this mega wave that just freaking ends the game. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's just a cool little inherent thing that I think is just built into MOBAs. Nobody designed it that way. But the longer a lane becomes, the more deadly waves can become. But then go back, restate your question one more time.
Yeah, the question is basically how do the different amount of time that's passed in the game, how does that affect this sort of philosophy on when to manage the lane in these different states versus when to farm?
I guess it depends on, there's times when you'll go back and forth, and for me it depends a lot on power spikes. If you A lot of times I'll be playing and I'll get a big lead and I'll be ready to fight, and then I go take a fight and it doesn't go well and I die, so I just lost a few waves. I say I'm still pretty strong, I'm gonna go for another fight, I die, I'm now completely like 5,000 souls behind because I've just spent 2 entire fights worth of play without getting any farm. So that point, I'll go back to my farming mindset. And I know with other players, I've said like, "Oh, perfect," because now I'm strong, so I'll take that role of fighting. Um, but for me, I think that's sort of a mindset that's very different in this game. Is a lot of people are in fight mindset a bit too much. I think I'm in farm mindset a bit too much, but I would say just in terms of the pace of the game, early on, very much farm. Middle game, when it between walkers, I would say that's your perfect time. If you've noticed me, Rogue, mid game, I go on these 20,000 soul power spikes where I just farm like absolute crazy. And I think that might be the perfect time to utilize this, is when the guardians are down. That's when you push in and you just eat like crazy, and then you come back and catch the wave and you do it all again. And that's where you can get, once these guardians go down, this is something that I'm not entirely sure, but now I'm sort of realizing now, is when these guardians go down, that's where I'm probably going on that power spike of just farming jungle like crazy and playing this farm mindset until I'm ready for, like, the walkers to start pushing walkers down and start looking for team fights. And then after that, that's where it sort of becomes much, much more fight mindset. If you even show your face in a lane, and you go a little bit too forward, because that's when, like, let's say I do want to push the wave into the walker, but we're at like 45 minutes. The moment that you get a wave here, someone's ziplining you and killing you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, I would say, yeah, early game, farm, mid game, omega farm, late game, this strategy of well, just always push it up. And, if there's no walker, and I'm saying always push the wave up into the next objective, you're putting your life on the line to push it all the way up to here. That does bring me to another point that I was going to get to that I forgot, but now I remembered, if you don't mind.
Great.
So let's say late game, and I'm saying push, the worst thing that you can do is, stop the wave right here, right? If I stop the wave here and it's shoving into the enemy, no one's freezing the lane at late game. You know what I mean? No one's saying it's 40 minutes into the game, let me freeze this wave and screw over the enemy team. So when I say, if you have to, we've got the 2 states rebounding and pushing. So I just put this into a state where it's pushing into them and it's not going to rebound it until it hits that walker. That's incorrect in this point. A lash is going to show up and get this farm or something. And if you stayed, you're getting lash ulted and you die immediately. You know what I mean? So
yes.
Late game, you don't have to worry about fixing the waves too much. An enemy will always rebound it back into you. And that's where crossing this midline is like a death wish. You know what I mean? If it's a stalemate game where both sides are pretty even, you probably only want to push the wave up to this middle line. Going past that, you become persona non grata, and you're the person to get Bebop hooked and lash ulted and Hayes assassinated.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Here's another question for you. So, um, yeah, I think this is something where, again, like you mentioned, there's a lot of players who have MOBA experience, a lot of players who don't. I don't. So it's fun, like, coming from a purely fight mindset and like going more into this farm idea. Now, something that I find really interesting, actually, let's say our team picks up Earn. And like, let's say again, we're like the yellow lane player, right? So let's say the Earn drop off spot is right where it is now. Like we have to take it from like, to that spot on the map. Um, a lot of times teammates will think it's obvious that we all need to fight for Earn together, right? Other times they'll think like, people can think different things at different times. So I guess the thing that I struggle with is, let's say I am yellow lane and I'm going crazy with a lot of this farm and I have sort of this, all the pieces in place, right, for a rebound and for farming the jungle on the way out. What is your, and so anyway, the point is basically a person like that, like if you're yellow and you're power farming like this, you can decide, do I want to help the team with the Earn, or is my team better off for me to like trust them to figure it out on their own while I continue to farm sort of as like a hedged bet, right? So I guess I'd like to learn a little more about your decision making there. So if you are power farming in yellow and your team wants to do Earn, how do you decide whether to help them or if it'll help us more in the long term for you to keep doing what you're doing?
Right. There's few objectives in the game that you really need to worry about where it goes from farming to fighting. Like walkers are going to die at some point, right? We know walkers and guardians are going to die at some point, but mid and Earn are those objectives that aren't necessarily always going to die, where now you have to decide, oh shoot, they're putting me on a clock. I need to decide, should I help my team or should I farm? And unfortunately, I am always taking the farm approach usually. I have to think, is this fight gonna win or lose us the game right now? Because at the end of the day, if we just gave up every objective, if we gave up every mid and we gave up every Earn, and we just said, well, we have to think, is this actually going to lose us the game? And if you did that, you would lose the game. Yeah, you would. But yeah, you have to basically, it's at the time think, one, am I strong enough to make a difference in this fight? Yes or no? And then two, if we lose this, um, is it going to lose us the game? And something that's worth considering too is there's an opportunity cost with getting Earn, is they have to dedicate players out of their lanes to get the Earn, right? So usually they'll send 1, 2, 3 people, and then you can say, well, since they don't have that pressure here, I'm going to go pressure here. It sucks that it's coming to my lane where I'm farming because now it is my problem. But oftentimes what I'll do is if they're going away from me, I go, oh my God, that's perfect. That gives me the chance to, go do damage here or steal their jungle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think two takeaways there too that are really helpful is, um, number one, you mentioned actually this yourself is like, will you being just one person make a difference in this fight? So for example, when I'm calling, like in our games, and there's this like bigger objective that's an optional one, right? Like we mentioned of
Right.
like Earn isn't a guarantee or it's not necessarily part of the game
Right.
unless you do it. What I'll call for basically is, right, if I'm saying we need to fight for Earn here, maybe I'll call for specific people. But a lot of times it's like you mentioned that if 4 players in the lane for the Earn is not enough and 6 players is enough, we probably shouldn't be going for Earn in the first place.
Right.
So yeah, that's something that I have in the back of my mind when like calling for these objectives as a play. Yeah, like to sort of give you that option of, even as a caller myself, I might want us to have that like hedged bet that like, ooh, even if we lose Earn, we can get their walker based on
Right,
this rebound
exactly.
play on
Yep.
the other side of the map. Yeah.
And I mean, there's things that they could do. They could take the Earn and trick you, and then we all of a sudden over send too many people, and then they end up splitting and getting our objectives. So yeah, at the time you have to analyze and see, what the whether or not it's worth. And to go back to your concrete example, if I'm doing this farm strategy, which I do a lot, I usually end up banking because I'm in a side lane with no shop. There's a shop closer now that wasn't there before. But if I'm in a side lane with no shop, I will often be sitting around with, I hate to say this, but 8 or 9,000 souls. And so in that situation, um, I don't know if this is something that's immediately apparent to you, but if you have 9,000 souls in your pocket, and even if all of them are, secured, you don't want to fight. Do you understand why?
Yeah, for sure. Like you're
Because
missing basically the power you would have in
exactly.
the fight. Yeah.
So that happens a lot. And so keep that in mind. If you're over here doing your power farm strategy and you have 9,000 souls, can you get back to a shop or get to a shop and then come back and fight and be a valuable contributor? Then sure. But it's about, yeah, I think high level doing a strategy like this to get a bunch of farm optimally and then turning that into late game advantages to win the game.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's like something else that we see at pro play for a lot of this decision making too is they'll basically start the objective and then reassess, right? So a lot of times in pro play, we'll see them grab the urn, take it actually more towards their own team's spawn, and then say, like, based on the enemy's response, number one. Number two, based on, like, let's say how well K9 is power farming on the other side of the map, right? Then we decide, do we actually want to deliver urn or not? So I think that's something, too, that is missing from the non-pro level is, yeah, this kind of idea that, we kind of want to let you keep power farming in this case, and we want most of our team to be ready for the urn, and then later, like once we're most of the way there, we can reassess. Like if it seems like a winning fight, then great, let's keep going. If it's even better for us to basically push these other objectives, maybe the enemy overcompensates and they send too many people to defend the urn, then that's great. We actually want to like send people to support you when we can win the walker as a result. So yeah, I think again having that sort of like, of course it always comes down to the team play, and communication is something that is like really clear here, because like we mentioned, if we're saying we want to look for a fight and you get to call like, wait, I don't have the souls spent for this fight yet, or again for these objectives like, oh, it's a really good time to go for urn, like, well, great, go for it, and let's see how well things go on the other side of the map that don't include the urn, and we'll make a decision later.
What I think is hilarious that I just realized is that this entire time I didn't even consider the option that it's my team grabbing the urn. I would be so pissed if I was farming and my team brought a team fight to me with 9,000 souls in my pocket. I would be so mad.
Yeah.
I didn't consider the fact that it was my team saying, "Hey buddy, we're done farming now. We're fighting." Right on top of all your farm. I would be so angry. But that's just me. Yeah. Again, I've been pretty adamant that I go a bit too heavy with the farm.
Cool. So, yeah, my last question here, we talked a lot about the way that we're managing these waves on the outside of the map, right? Which also, like, 2/3 of the players are on the outside of the map. So I guess I'm curious.
One of them is McGinnis. She's out here, and that's me.
Yeah, right. So I guess I'm curious, like, talking about basically this wave management, again, like when to farm, when to not, when to like have the fighting mindset versus the farm mindset, all this. Are there any meaningful changes to this philosophy if you are a mid lane player instead?
Yeah, I would say especially in a public lobby, a random lobby without coordinated 6 players, you can't sit on a wave and let it bounce all the way back here. Your teammates are gonna catch it much sooner. It's really hard and maybe detrimental. I can't think of what I think it is detrimental. I can't put exactly why. I feel like it's detrimental to sit on a wave and just let it push all the way into you. You know what I mean? It just feels so much different in a middle lane. Maybe you can help me understand why. There's a thing in League of Legends, I know, which is a very similar map, 3 lanes. If you are about to lose, or one, right before a fight, you push out your middle wave. If you want to go do mid boss would be over here in League of Legends. You push out the mid wave before you go do it, because let's say it's lost and the wave is right here, you just lost the game because they only have to push this far. But if their wave is right here before or when you lose your mid boss, then they have to push that far and you'll all respawn in time. So I feel like for whatever reason, it's much different. You don't want your mid waves to be, it's mid wave is much more of a fight mindset. The outer waves are much more of a farm mindset.
Yeah, I think that does make a lot of sense. Something that stands out to me as well is just rotates are brutal if like the enemy zipline is going into your territory or vice versa for the other side. So yeah, in a world where like if the wave is basically pushed up to the enemy walker, we have a zipline to the middle of the map to all of the objectives, right? Things like running urn, things like going for bridge buff.
Everywhere.
If we want them, we have a faster rotate. If the enemy's going for them, we have a faster a way to contend. So yeah, like you mentioned, I guess if we were going, for example, like a rebound play or something like that, or trying to manage getting a couple extra souls for the farm, whatever opportunities we do have for the fight mindset are a lot worse, or like the pain is, it feels
Yeah.
worse, I guess, coming from the middle lane, right?
I tried to envision just now freezing a wave right here, and it's you can't do that. Let's say you get an early loss, in your lane, and you try to freeze a wave right here. Oh my God, I am now fully on board with the opportunity cost mindset of you are trolling. You they get all of this, right? Whereas yeah, you kind of you take your zip line and you apply like a, you know, how much map control do you get from that? And this one is so much more important than this outer lane. So yeah, I'm fully in agreement there.
Yeah, very interesting. I've that was my last question for the map here, at least. So that for sure covers a lot of the adjustments for me to, yeah, like again, unlearn a lot of these like fight all the time ideas, and I guess the ways that you can leverage, especially the outer lanes, like what ways there are to leverage the farm in favor of our team, and the way that sort of impacts the different states of the game. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm definitely excited to look more for number one opportunities, I guess, myself to like watch out for times I can claim all of these souls during a play for one of these rebounds, or when it's appropriate to freeze. But I think for myself especially, where yeah, being like a fight first person, where like I love being in the middle lane and rotating towards my teammates for those different opportunities, having the opportunity to call around players that are farming in this way and can get such an advantage. Now I think I know what I'm looking for rather than like thinking I can call them into a fight at will anytime, right?
Yeah. I would say if there's one thing to take away, it's approaching a lane that's in some unknown state and deciding how can I fix this immediately based on jungle camps around me? How can I get the most farm in the next 2 minutes? Right? I know when I first started playing the game, I would finish a jungle camp and I would come up from upstairs, the underground jungle camp, and I would be like, what do I do now? And I would just run like a kid chasing candy to the nearest farm, and then the nearest farm, and then the nearest farm, and then the nearest farm, and I would have no idea the long-term plan. I was just filling in the dots like this. If you use these principles, looking at a lane and glancing at it, it's much easier to immediately be like, oh, I know it's pushing into me, it's pushing into the enemy, I need to fix it, etc. Uh, that's one thing. And then the second thing is, yeah, if you can, always, or at least in the middle game when you're not worried about getting lash ulted from their base, uh, always try to push it into their guardian.
Yeah, I would say a big takeaway from mine that I just wanted to echo sort of your sentiment too. When I am that spawner in our own spawn, right, and looking at the waves, you mentioned sort of that like kid in a candy store of what's the first thing I should run
Yeah.
at.
Yep.
I want to approach my matches now thinking, what state is the lane in, and what state do we want it to be in?
Right.
And I think that'll inspire a lot more of, number one, what I personally would want to do with myself and where I want to roll out. But second, it also inspires a lot of the communication around, again, asking teammates like, how do you have this lane under control? What is your plan next? Hey, do you want to do this together? So yeah, the collaboration is what it always comes down to. But I think this gives so much more context that I was absolutely missing as a non-MOBA veteran.
Yeah, it's weird how much of this is not clear at all. You wouldn't even know that waves pendulum. That was something that took me forever to learn, and that waves get bigger over time. It's, yeah, these things, unless someone explicitly tells you, you're probably not going to notice it on your own. So, disclaimer, um, waves will not always bounce back and behave as expected. I saw during testing with bots that multiple times, it's insane this game actually. At level 1, let's say there's 4 red minions, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 yellows. I saw the red minions kill all 4, and the yellow minions killed 1. That is insane to me. Could you, like, you would expect this to be fairly close. They absolutely stomped them. One thing is healer minions with RNG. One is just they're targeting RNG. The second is healer minion RNG. So those two things can absolutely cause a wave that's pushing one way to just randomly stop and go the other way without going all the way in. I'm hoping that after beta is over, that doesn't happen anymore, but I can't be for sure.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I mean, yeah, we've seen too that like a minion will get stuck, and yeah, it is very different here with the geometry too, right? Like sometimes minions will get spawned on the high ground, right? So maybe
Yeah,
only the long range minions do any damage at all, or as the others are falling down. Yeah,
I
there's
would
there's so
say
many to it. Yeah.
those things, the things that I get would hope are fixed are targeting glitches where they just go back and forth and don't actually kill anything. But the targeting RNG will always exist. The healer RNG will also always exist, and I think that those things enough can cause really one-sided things. I'm not sure if it would cause it to rebound in the middle of the wave. I would like that to not happen because it does kind of take away fundamental strategies in MOBAs, but who knows?
Yeah, so that does it. I'm super grateful for you to give us this breakdown on all these different lane mechanics. And yeah, again, coming from a non-MOBA veteran, this has helped me unlearn a lot of bad habits here in Deadlock and kind of show me a lot of ways forward. So yeah, really grateful for your time. And if you have any other anything else you'd like to close with, please do. Sure.
Yeah, just remember, farm first, fight later. Number goes up equals neuron activation.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Have fun. We did it.
Sweet.